What if success isn't about how things look, but how they actually feel? Today, we talk about the difference between relationships and transactions and why faking it till you make it just doesn't work anymore. Not that it ever did. Because the truth is, people are really good at detecting what's real and what's not. Our guest challenges us to stop performing and to start getting honest, to ask a simple but powerful question: why? What are you actually trying to achieve? From there, we start piecing together the puzzle of life. But here's the twist: the picture on the box keeps changing as he indicates. And maybe that's the point. This isn't about following rigid steps, it's about building frameworks, finding contentment, and getting comfortable with who you are before trying to prove anything to anyone else. Let's roll right in. All right. Welcome to the Work Sucks, But I Like It podcast. Today we have Scott Maderer. He's a co founder of Inspired Stewardship, where his work is to help align Christian men and couples align how they use their time, talent, and treasures so they can live out their true calling, serve others, and provide for their families with purpose. He's also podcast host of Inspired Stewardship and also the author of the book Inspired Living: Assemble the Puzzle of Your Calling by Mastering Your Time, Your Talent, and Your Treasures. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
No, looking forward to it. So, Scott, I have to say thank you again. So, just so everyone knows here, we met at PodFest 2026 down in Orlando this year. And I came into PodFest with a concussion, and Scott was
Yeah.
checking in every day when I saw him so that I was doing okay. So, Scott, thank you so much. Even when I got home, you sent me a message. So I really appreciate that. So, thank you.
Yeah. I can tell you weren't doing 100%. So
Yeah, I was definitely
and
off for sure.
concussions are not anything to mess with. So
Man, it was brutal, but I was so fortunate to be there to meet you. We were having such a great conversation one night at a particular event, and we're like, "Oh, we got to get on each other's shows and whatnot." And then I got back, and I'm like, "Holy crap, Scott's already on my show already." So this is perfect. So here we are. It
awesome.
already worked out. So Scott, so welcome to the show. The first question I'd like to ask guests is, how do you define work today?
For me, work is obviously my coaching business, which is, kind of what I do for a living. But stepping back from that, work for me is about connection. It's about influence. It's about looking at others and trying to build community. That's where connection comes from, community. I think work is so much bigger than just what I do to get paid for. For me, whether it's stuff I do at church as a volunteer, whether it's stuff I do as a husband or a father, it's all work, but not in a not in a bad way, because work, I think, well, again, back to the title of your show, which I love, and I've told you I love. Work sucks, right? Everyone hates work, and it's like it's not a bad word to me.
So walk us through, Scott, how you applied this definition of work. You mentioned coaching. What other areas do you apply this sort of definition in every day?
Yeah. For me, connection and community, I think, is the fundamental thing that I'm looking for in work. And so, whether it's working as a volunteer, like I said, I'm looking at ways to build connection and community, whether that's with the other folks that I'm working with, or whether that's with the client, or whether that's with my spouse about what I do for a living. All of the things come down to relationship so much more than transaction, that's really what I focus on. And again, it's in every component of my life. I look at that. I send my son a text message every morning when I get up that says, "I love you." And the reason for that is I grew up in a household where I can remember my father saying, "I love you" to me one time. I'm sure he said it more than that, but I literally only have one memory of him saying it. And so I made a vow years ago that my son is going to hear that from me every single day of his life. you know, Almost to the point now that he's probably like, "Yeah, get dad, I get it." It's kind of annoying, but it's not, because he knows where it comes from. By the way, I've told him that story, and so it's connection. And so I could look at that as work to text him every morning, or I can look at that as my commitment to connecting with my son, if that makes sense.
No, I love that. I want to go further with connection, Scott. So today I feel like in an online where we're connected now, walk us through how you connect with people outside of your family. What does that look like? What's the work that you do to connect with people?
What I mean by that is, for me, connection comes through asking and listening, asking questions and listening to answers, and trying to listen to go beyond just the surface level. I think so often now we do a very superficial job of connecting, "Hey, Tony, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm busy," or "I'm fine." We that nobody that no, you're not,
Yeah, right, right,
and
right.
it's and or if all you are is busy, if that's really the most important thing you wanna convey with another human being, that's kinda sad.
Mm,
So I try to ask the questions of people, busy doing what? No, really, how are you doing? You know, that's why I checked up on you, when
yeah.
you got back, is because it wasn't just about, gee, I hope this guy doesn't keel over at Podfest. It was, I sincerely connected with you and wanted to know that you were okay, and it's real, it's not fake. So connection is about relationship, and the only way to have relationship is to get to know each other and
Mm,
go back and forth and ask questions and listen to answers. So when I work with clients, I literally measure. I go back and look at the transcripts of my call, and I'll count how many questions did I ask?
mm,
How often did I talk instead of listen? What was my talk time versus their talk time? That's a
mm.
very empirical way of measuring it, but it really does matter because I don't wanna be the one talking the whole time when I'm in a coaching situation.
What do you shoot for, Scott? Just out of curious. I love this
Oh,
number
I don't
analysis
think there
here.
is a magic number
Sure.
per se because it's contextual, it depends on the
Yep.
situation. So, like, right now, this morning, I met with a client couple that are kinda going through a crisis situation. So, for them, it was like 60% them
Mm,
talking and 40% me talking. It's pretty almost 50-50. But in other situations where I'm working with a client who's trying to figure out a career transition or, what do I want to be when I grow up? That kind of questions. And how is this going to affect my money? And what do I need to build into my business? Very questions that there isn't really a right answer. Man, then it's more like 90% them and 10% me. All I'm doing is asking a few questions and then just letting them talk, and being quiet, and then maybe ask a follow-up question. It's kind of, in some ways, it's like podcasting, which we both do. When I'm on a show, I end up talking a lot, but when I'm the host, I don't talk nearly as much. But by asking a good question, you draw something out of the guest, and so it's focusing on the question and the listen as opposed to just the superficial. And again, I don't do it perfectly either. I'll walk into a Starbucks and just the, "Hey, how you doing? Great," blah, blah, blah. But I try really hard to, like, if I walk into a Starbucks, I actually try to look at the person's name tag and call them by their name. "Hey, Sue, how you doing?" You know, it it's not that big of a deal. We're not gonna have a 45-minute conversation, but at the same time, she heard her name, you know, which, let's face it, if you're working at Starbucks, you don't hear your name. You hear people yelling at you all day long. It's about all you hear. So it's those things like that.
No, I love that. So I want to kind of dive deeper and get a little technical here with this connection. So again, this day and age, we've got AI, we're connecting across computers. You mentioned something that I really like, and I want you to expand upon this idea of real versus superficial connections, right? Sometimes it's hard to kind of probe, right? That's a vulnerable thing. What are some
Mhm.
of your strategies that you could share with the audience for this work of like getting to know the person in a real sense? Because I felt that when you met me. I'm like, "Oh, this guy's real. He's not trying to sell me crap and all this. He's just a
Yeah.
real dude." So walk us through that strategy if you don't mind.
So I'm gonna talk 2 levels here. So the first thing to realize is it is a strategy and there are techniques, but the way you use them matters. And
Mm,
what I mean by that is if any of you ever's read, Influence by, Cialdini, he talks about things like scarcity and urgency and, their sales techniques. By the way, folks, every single one of you has heard them and had them used on you, you know? I still remember there was an online guy that was selling a PDF. So it was a PDF file, and his website said, "Only 50 copies left." And I'm literally looking at that going, "That's bull." It's a PDF. You can make as many of them as you want, you know? It's like
Love that.
it's like, there's no way there's only 50 left, you know? Now, could I have created that scarcity in a different way that was real? Yes, but because he was creating it in a false way, it doesn't come across authentic. And so the technique, urgency, scarcity, sincerity, all of these things, that is a technique, but it only works if you really mean it, you know? And so I don't think we can do it by faking it. So are you interested in the transaction and making the sale? I feel that. I mean, again, think about it. Every single one of us that's listening right now, you can think of a sales situation where you walked in. You know, the auto salesperson has the reputation for this, right? And
Yep.
you walk out going, "Oh god, I need a shower." You know, that's
Yeah, right,
it just
right.
feels icky. And it's because they're using those techniques, but there's no sincerity behind it. You know, it's just about
Mm.
selling the car. And so for me, it's things like getting permission. For instance, my coaching clients, one of the questions I ask them is, "How hard do you want me to push you?"
Mm.
Now, here's the interesting thing. The number that they give me isn't what's important. I'll ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is I'm gonna push you really hard, I'm gonna be in your face and really push it, and a 1 is, "Hey, it's fine, let's go, whatever you want," what's the number? I care about the number, and I also don't care about the number because, A, by getting a number, I'm already getting permission. Even if it's a 1, they've already said, "You can push me," you know? But I'm actually more curious about what comes after it because they give me a number and I say, "Great, why that number and not" so if they say a 4, why a 4 and not a 5? Why a 4 and not a 3? And now they start articulating the emotion behind it, the feeling behind it. Now we've got a standard that I can actually operate from, and so I can sincerely push you and ask questions, but I can do it in a way that actually connects. And again, I've done that even in non-coaching relationships where I think I believe at Podfest, there was something that I wanted to kinda give some feedback on something you said, and so before I gave you feedback, I said, "Hey, would you like me to give you some feedback about this?
Yep.
Or would you be open to getting feedback about" ask permission,
Yeah.
you know?
It's funny, Scott. I was looking through my notes because I'm like, oh, we had this really great discussion, and you said it really well here. It's like, I'm going to kind of paraphrase it, but as a coach, you indicated to me to get them to state the solution or problem in their own words.
Yeah,
Right. And that's what I really like. And I remember that coming from you. So, yeah.
yeah, and you ask and let them tell you. And even if you give them pointers or give them advice, you still want them to come back and own it and say, "So this is what I mean, this is what I'm gonna do." It's always leaning into relationship over transaction and connection instead of just the going through the motions of the process. So, yeah, I wanna be sincere, it is a strategy and there are techniques, you know, but at the same time, you can't just learn those techniques and fake them, because they won't work. Human beings are really, really good BS detectors. We're finely crafted. We read body language, we read subtle cues, we read all sorts of stuff that we don't even consciously know we're doing, and we go, "Huh," and I'm not gonna say there's nobody out there that's really such a good actor that they can completely fake it. There are, but most of us are really bad at it, I mean, so it's easier for us to just be real, just be authentic, and just be honest.
How do we come from that place so we don't come across as superficial?
I think it is getting back in touch. This turns it around. You've got to be comfortable with yourself first. I think where most of us end up kind of with the fake it till we make it thing, it comes out of
Yeah.
imposter syndrome. It comes out of the feeling of, oh man, they're going to figure out that I really don't know what the heck I'm doing. And the minute I'm exposed, I'm out of here. It's this is not going to work anymore. And so we cover that up with bravado. We cover that up with being arrogant. We cover that up with that flash, and it's e even down to where you wear a suit just because you want people to think you've got money, that kind of thing, the fake it till you make it. I had a couple that I worked with, I affectionately refer to them when I'm talking about them as Ken and Barbie. They know this. I told them I wouldn't use their real name because they didn't want me to, but I said, "Can I call you Ken and Barbie?" And they're like, "That's perfect. I love it." Ken and Barbie lived in the nicest house on the block, biggest house. They both had really good jobs. He was like a doctor, she's a lawyer, not their real jobs, but something like that. He drove a brand new Beamer, she drove a brand new Lexus, everything. They members of the country club, all of the stuff, right? Check all of the boxes. But every time they entertained, they never entertained at their house. They always entertained at the country club. And the reason why is if you walked in their house, they had an air mattress and 2 lawn chairs and a folding table, and that was it. That was all the furniture they owned.
Oh, wow. Is that actual
Because
fact? Sorry, those are the actual.
yeah, this is real.
Wow.
I mean, again, I'm changing their job
Sure.
titles and I'm changing their names,
Yeah.
but everything else I'm telling you is 100% true. And it's like, why is that? Well, it's because they had student loan debt, they had other things that were taking up huge amounts of their income, but they were still spending income to look good,
Mm.
because they had the kind of jobs where the expectation was you live in the nicest house on the block, you drive the nicest car, that was what everyone told them. And until they decided to change the way they believed, and until they decided, hey, wait a minute, that surface level stuff's not really what's important. We really want to leave a legacy. We really want to be able to give. We really want to, and they made different decisions because their beliefs changed, their habits changed, their mindset changed. And by the way, it wasn't like I told them, oh, you got to pay off debt, you got to sell your house, you got to sell your car. I never told them to do anything, but they did things because they changed their belief and changed the actions that
Mm.
align to get into that new belief because I asked them questions and got them to really stop and think, well, what do I actually want out of life? you
So what was the
know?
question, Scott? I'm really curious. What was the question? Can you give us an example of how you started steering
I
the
asked them
external?
things about
Yeah.
their why. What's your
Mm.
purpose? What are you actually trying to achieve? I ask people questions like, it's the obituary question, but I've come up with a way to ask it nicer. People ask people, "Well, what do you want your obituary to sound like?" And for me, that was always like, God, that's horrible. I hate asking people that. So what I ask people is if I picked you up in a magic machine and I took you 150, 250 years in the future and you were able to look back and see your entire life, what's the legacy you want to leave behind? What's the story you want to leave behind? What's the impact you want to have? And all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, yeah. Wait a minute. Is it really I drove the nicest car? Is that really what's important?" Well, no, of course not. Nobody would say that. Well, I'm not gonna say nobody.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
an
Right, right.
exception.
Right, right, right.
But, most of us don't say that. We talk about family, and we talk about kids, and we talk about, career, and we talk about giving, and we talk about these things. We don't talk about that's stuff, if that makes sense. We talk about what the stuff means to us, but it's not the stuff. What is it about having a nice car that you like? Well, it makes people think I'm successful. Okay. Are you actually interested in whether people think you're successful or are you actually interested in being successful? Well, I'm actually interested in being successful. Great. What does success mean to you? And then they'll start telling you stuff and it's like, is that really what it means to you or is that what you've been told your whole life it is?
Mm.
And you have to get them to think beyond, because a lot of us, quite frankly, are living out somebody else's dream,
I
you
agree
know?
with that.
And I don't wanna go to the doctor who's only a doctor because his mommy wanted him to be a doctor or her
Yeah.
mommy wanted her to be a doctor, I don't know about you.
Right.
That's really not the doctor I hope I have an appointment with.
So, Scott, I really love the subtitle. Of course, I love the title too of your book, Inspired Living Assemble the Puzzle of Your Calling. So, when we talk about this external appearance of people, right, I think of a puzzle. There's a picture on the box. I have the pieces in the box physically to make this puzzle. Walk us through what you mean by maybe in this example here with this couple, what is the puzzle piece that they were missing? Were they looking at the wrong puzzle?
Yeah, all of the above. So here's the neat thing about that analogy. From a working level, most people put together puzzles like this, right? First, we build the frame, the kind of outside, right? And then we start building the center. And there is an analogy at that level where first you have to kind of build the habits and the systems and the processes, that's the frame, and then it kind of fills into the middle. The actual results come from that. So there's a real surface level kind of analogy. But let's go a step further. When you talk about putting together your calling or your life, you mentioned there's a puzzle on the picture on the box. Yeah, only that picture keeps changing, because you get new information and details fill in and other things disappear. And what's more, oftentimes we start putting the puzzle together, and not only are we missing some pieces, we've actually got pieces from somebody else's puzzle in our box, Because again, those things that your mom told you, or your dad told you, or that you saw in the news, or you read a book, or whatever. Things come into our brain from a million different sources, some good, some bad. And sometimes that puts extra puzzle pieces that aren't even your puzzle pieces. And so you do have to do a really good job of stepping back and going, okay, based on where I'm at today, because you never know the future, what's that puzzle box picture kind of look like? And what's cloudy and what's clear and what's cloudy? Okay, well, what if something's cloudy, it probably means I'm missing some pieces. So what do I need to do to go get those pieces? And if something's really clear, okay, I'll then have to check and make sure, is it really clear and it really fits with me? Or is it just clear because somebody else gave it to me partially put together? you know? And actually, I need to rip some of these pieces out. And so there's this constant dance that we do when it comes to things like calling, because I don't think our calling is ever really something we arrive at. I think it is the journey itself, that process of discovery, that is the calling, if that makes sense.
No, I love that. So I guess like with the puzzle, because I really love this analogy still, I guess you said the picture's forever evolving. At what
Mhm.
point can we say like we're okay with it? Like what's sort of the internal dialogue, the metric to say you talked about cloudy versus clear. What are we using to assess our puzzle if it's really a complete picture of our life?
I think you begin to get a feeling of contentment.
Ah, okay.
And contentment, to be clear, is not complacency. So I can be content and very driven. I can be content and still want more. Content doesn't mean, oh, well, that's it. That's all I'm ever going to get. And that's complacency. And I think a lot of times we misuse the word contentment when we talk about someone. Oh, well, they're just not driven, they're not active, they don't really want any more out of life, they've kinda given up, and we say, and we talk about that as if it's contentment. That's complacency. What I'm talking about when I say contentment is, that there's parts that are still cloudy, but you're okay with that because 'cause you're on a process of discovering them. You know which parts are clear, and you're okay with that, and you're even okay with the fact that down the road, I may get some information that means some of the shifts or changes. Because you've leaned into the process more than the destination. It isn't about getting it right, it's about getting it.
How do you get someone to see the benefit of seeing the process, right? It's kind of like I call it Eastern philosophy, right? In the West, it's all about, plant the flag,
Results,
cross the
results,
finish
results.
line. Yeah, exactly. How do we, people in the West, I guess I'm talking specifically, how do you get them to see the process as the real value?
I think you have to begin to get them to identify the fact that all of our lives are film strips, not photographs,
Ah, love that.
and no matter where you're at, no matter whether you're at the peak of the mountain and everything is going your way, or whether you're down in the deepest, darkest night of the soul, down in the valley, and you can't even see the way out. The one thing I can tell you is it will change. You know, I'm not even saying better or worse. I'm just saying different. You know, it's not a value judgment. It's not an observation of good or bad. It's just an observation of the fact that the world is not static and we are not static. Things move, things change, things adapt. So when you realize that, there is no destination, there is no final step. So if it's not that, if I can't ever really arrive, get it, get her done, get the results, whatever name you want to give it, if I can't do that, well, then I have no choice but to recognize that then it's the process that matters. It's the habits, it's the mindsets, it's the systems, it's the beliefs. Those drive actions. Your thoughts drive your beliefs drive your actions. Then here's what's funny. Then your actions create your thoughts, which
Yeah.
create your beliefs, which create more actions. It's a
Cycle.
feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
So you can start anywhere. If it's a circle, there is no beginning, there is no end. Start anywhere. So if you want to be different, believe different or act different or think different, because all of those things will begin to feed back into each other. And that's what it means to lean into the process, is to recognize that whatever it is today, it can be different, and it's going to be different. So I can either be intentional about that difference, or I can just let it happen to me. you know? And so in a way, I think focusing on the process is actually more results driven than just focusing on the destination, which is weird, but it is, because I think that's what really creates sustainable change over time.
No, beautiful. Scott, if listeners want to pick up your book, what is one thing, and they want to read it, what is one thing that they would take from it? What's one key takeaway?
So I built the book with the idea of frameworks instead of processes. And so let me kind of define that, and then I'll give you a takeaway. What I mean by frameworks is a lot of books are written with a process. Do this, do this, do this, do this. This is the order. You begin here, you end here. The problem with the process is, number one, you have to start in the same place. And number two, you have to want to end in the same place. And I don't think most people are starting in the same place and ending in the same place. So I tried to give frameworks, which are ways of thinking. We're back to thought, belief, action, so that you can begin to act differently. So you can create a different system. And so, as an example, one of the frameworks is, if we first invest in ourselves, that naturally leads us to an opportunity to invest in others. If I get better at something, what happens is I just begin to share it with other people. That's just very natural and normal. If I do that, by definition, what begins to happen is I begin to develop influence. Now, all of a sudden, people look over and go, "Hey, Tony knows about this." That's influence. You have a reputation, you have an influence. And out of that influence comes an impact. So, the framework is, first invest in yourself, then invest in others, then develop your influence, and then impact the world. And the truth is, that happens naturally if you invest in yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a selfless way. So that's what we concentrate on. And so the point is, that framework works whether you're a high school student or you're 88 years old, because it isn't dependent on where you're starting or where you're ending. You can apply it to different things at different points in your life, and the framework still works.
No, I love that distinction with framework versus kind of a process. I really dig that. So, Scott, this is the Work Sucks, but I Like It podcast. What is something that sucks about your work today? And what are you doing to make it not suck?
I think for me, I think this is true for most coaches, the part that, quote, sucks about coaching is, the client acquisition and the, marketing and the sales and all of that stuff, right? Because it's all the part that feels very transactional. you
Mm,
know and remember, the whole beginning of our
right.
conversation was about relationship, not transaction. So obviously that's the part I most hate. And so what I've done is I've worked with a lot of other coaches and tried to develop ways of doing all of those things in more relational ways.
Mm.
So
What's an example?
rather than marketing by going out and running ads and doing all of that, I just build relationships with people that know what I do, love what I do, and they send me people. It's referral partners, right? So that's a fancy name for it. Think of it as affiliates, but with people. Um, when I talk about sales, I don't do a hard close. So many coaches, you pop on with the coach and, you got to decide today. And if you decide by the end of this call, you get $500 off and, all of the, and I hate that. So I have a 24-hour close, which means at the end of our conversation, if we have an assessment meeting, at the end of that, I go, at the beginning of the call, I tell you, by the way, you're not going to make a decision on this call. I won't let you make a decision on this call. I don't want you to tell me at the end of this call you're ready for coaching. I want you to go think about it. Part of that is the nature of a lot of my coaching is about money and time. Well, it'd be really hypocritical when I tell people to take their time to make decisions to then go, except for this decision. When you're hiring me, make that decision quickly. The rest of them, take your time. So I try to find ways to, even within those things that are the parts that stink and that aren't fun, to at least try to create them in a more relational way so that they're more authentic and they connect better with me. Now, there's still a certain amount of which, the laundry has to be washed, so to speak. You still have to I still have to do invoicing and that kind of stuff, but that's okay. It's relatively minor in the larger scheme of things.
So, if listeners of this show want to reach out for your coaching services, where's a good place for them to land?
So I actually put together a page just for your listeners. So if they go over to my website, which is inspiredstewardship.com, and then just put in / work sucks, all one word, no space in between, just work sucks. What you'll find there is I put together a page with some free resources they could just download for free. Again, I'd rather give than take, so that's there. There is a place they could schedule an assessment call like we were just talking about. Not a real pushy call because you just heard that. My link for the book is there to download the book. My podcast is on there as well. And again, you can find all of that over at inspiredstewardship.com / work sucks.
Scott, it's been a pleasure having you on the show and good to see you again as well since Podfest.
Absolutely.
No, thank you. All of our lives are film strips, not photographs. That definitely stood out, especially in a world filled with taking photos and putting them up on our social media profiles. For those old enough to know this, it's that Kodak moment. But it's not one moment, not one title, not one win. It's the full sequence, the growth, the pivots, the lessons. Scott reminds us that chasing the image of success, cars, suits, status, that's all surface level, and people see through it. What actually matters is who you are when none of that is there. So the real question becomes, are you trying to look successful or actually be successful? Because those are two very different paths. As always, success isn't a matter of good luck, it's good skills. Today, get out your pen and paper, not your phone, and write out the answer to this. Scott asks us to think about 250 years from now, what do you want to be remembered for? It's probably not the car you drove, no one cares. It's the impact you had, the people you helped, the life you actually lived. For me, I want to be remembered for trying my best in everything I do and not leaving any regrets. See you next time.
And there's a wind that blows across the plains, and it sings.